Eleanor lived in a small house at the end of Maple Street. It wasn't fancy, the paint peeled a bit around the windows, and the garden needed work, but it was home. Every morning, she woke up at 6:30, made 2 cups of tea, and carried one to her mother's bedroom. "Morning, Mom," she'd say, placing the steaming cup on the bedside table. Her mother's hands, now twisted with arthritis, would reach for the mug as she smiled up at her daughter. Eleanor wasn't rich or famous. At 45, her brown hair already showed streaks of gray that she never bothered to dye. She owned exactly 3 pairs of jeans, 5 sweaters, and 1 pair of sensible shoes that she wore almost everywhere. The neighbors knew her as that quiet woman who takes care of her mom. What they didn't know was that behind her modest appearance, Eleanor was a genius with computers. In her small home office, surrounded by old family photos and potted plants, she fixed problems that baffled experts at major companies. She could spot weaknesses in computer systems that others missed. It was like having a superpower, except she didn't wear a cape, just her comfortable cardigan. "I don't understand how you do it," her friend Lily often said. "You look at a screen full of code and see things nobody else can see." Eleanor would just shrug. "It's just patterns, like knitting, but with numbers instead of yarn." She worked from home most days, which let her care for her mother. The arrangement suited her perfectly. No office politics, no fussy clothes, and she could work in her socks while drinking tea. Her clients never saw her face. They just knew her as EC, the problem solver who never failed. One rainy Tuesday, while Eleanor was making lunch for her mother, her phone rang. She rarely got calls. Most of her work came through email, so she almost didn't answer. "Hello," she said, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder as she spread peanut butter on bread. "Is this EC?" The voice on the other end sounded stressed. "Yes, that's me." "This is Paul from Sky High Airlines. We have a situation. Our entire system might be at risk, and nobody can figure out what's wrong. Your name came highly recommended." Eleanor frowned. She didn't usually work with airlines. "I'm sorry, but I don't." "We'll pay triple your usual rate," Paul interrupted, "and we need you here in person. Tomorrow." Her first thought was her mother. "I can't just leave." "It's urgent. Lives could be at stake if our systems fail." Eleanor glanced at her mother dozing in her armchair. The oxygen tank beside her made a soft, rhythmic sound. The medication was expensive, the house needed repairs, and if computer systems on planes were at risk. "I'll need to arrange care for my mother," she said finally. "We'll send a first-class ticket. Our executives will meet you before the flight to brief you." After hanging up, Eleanor sat down heavily at the kitchen table. She hadn't flown in years. She didn't own business clothes or fancy luggage. But the money would help with her mother's medical bills and if people were in danger. She called Lily, who agreed to stay with her mother. She pulled out her one decent backpack. She found her passport in the desk drawer under old tax forms. That night, after her mother went to sleep, Eleanor stayed up late researching Sky High Airlines. Founded 30 years ago, it had grown into one of the country's largest carriers. Its sleek advertisements showed beautiful people in business suits enjoying champagne in spacious first-class cabins. People like her never appeared in those ads. As she packed her worn jeans and plain sweaters, Eleanor had no idea that by this time tomorrow, she would be standing outside that first-class lounge, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt before. She didn't know that soon after, she would bring one of the most powerful companies in the country to its knees. She was just a simple woman packing a bag, worried about leaving her mother, unaware that her life was about to change forever. The airport buzzed with activity as Eleanor pulled her worn backpack higher on her shoulder. She'd woken up at 4 a.m., kissed her sleeping mother's forehead, and whispered goodbye to Lily, who was dozing on the couch. The taxi driver hadn't talked much during the ride, which suited her just fine. Her stomach was already in knots. Eleanor checked her phone again. The text from Paul was clear: "Meet our team at the first-class lounge. Terminal B, 7:30 a.m. She'd never been in a first-class lounge before. Did they serve food? She hadn't had time for breakfast. Following the signs, she finally spotted the entrance, all gleaming wood and soft lighting. A young woman stood behind a curved desk, her blue uniform perfectly pressed, not a hair out of place. Her lipstick matched her uniform exactly, and her nails were polished to perfection. "Good morning," Eleanor said with a small smile. "I'm here to meet the Sky High executive team." The woman, her name tag read Vanessa, looked up. Her eyes moved from Eleanor's sensible shoes to her simple jeans, then to her slightly wrinkled sweater, and finally to her face, which was free of makeup and framed by unstyled hair. The corner of Vanessa's mouth twitched downward. "Do you have a first-class ticket or membership card?" she asked, her voice crisp. "No, but I'm supposed to meet." "I'm sorry, this area is for premium customers only." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You can wait in the general seating area." Eleanor shifted her weight. There must be some mistake. Paul from Sky High specifically told me to meet them here. Could you check if they've left a message? My name is Eleanor Carter. Vanessa tapped at her computer, her red nails clicking against the keys. "No, there's nothing here. Perhaps you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand. Look, can you call him? His number is—" "Ma'am," Vanessa cut in, her voice slightly louder. Two well-dressed businessmen glanced over. "Without a first-class ticket or membership, I cannot allow you to enter. Those are the rules." Heat crept up Eleanor's neck. She wasn't used to being in public, let alone being stared at. "Where should I wait then?" Vanessa pointed to a row of plastic seats near a noisy coffee stand. "Over there should be fine." With her cheeks burning, Eleanor retreated to the seats. She sent a text to Paul. "I'm at the airport, but they won't let me into the lounge. Where should we meet?" No response came. 1 hour passed. Eleanor watched as people in expensive suits breezed past Vanessa, who greeted them warmly. Her backpack sat heavy on her lap. She hadn't expected luxury, but she hadn't expected to be treated like she was invisible either. Another hour crawled by. Her phone remained silent. The smell of coffee made her empty stomach growl, but she didn't want to leave her spot in case Paul appeared. A cleaning lady pushing a cart stopped nearby. She noticed Eleanor and gave her a sympathetic look. "Been waiting long?" she asked in a gentle voice. "Too long," Eleanor replied. The woman nodded knowingly. They forget we're people too sometimes. Just as Eleanor was considering giving up and going home, 3 men in expensive suits walked through the terminal. They moved with the confidence of people used to getting their way. The tallest one, with silver at his temples, checked his watch and frowned. "Are you Paul?" Eleanor asked, standing up as they approached the lounge. The man turned, surprised. "Yes. Are you, E.C.?" "Eleanor Carter, yes. I've been waiting for over 2 hours." Paul looked confused. "We told you to meet us at the first-class lounge." "They wouldn't let me in." The 3 men exchanged glances. "Ah," Paul said finally. "A misunderstanding. Our apologies." But Eleanor could tell it wasn't a misunderstanding at all. They had simply never imagined that their computer expert would look like her, a plain woman in simple clothes. "We have a lot to discuss," Paul continued, checking his watch again. "Let's board. We can talk on the plane." As they walked past the lounge, Vanessa smiled brightly at the men. "Have a wonderful flight, gentlemen." Her eyes slid past Eleanor as if she wasn't there at all. The first-class cabin looked like something from another world. Soft leather seats wider than Eleanor's armchair at home. Flight attendants offering champagne on silver trays. Eleanor sat stiffly, painfully aware of her worn jeans and simple sweater among the business suits and designer dresses. "Water is fine," she said when offered a drink. Her throat felt dry, but she needed to stay sharp. Paul sat across from her with his colleagues, a younger man with slicked back hair introduced as Tom from legal, and an older gentleman with round glasses named Richard, the head of operations. They didn't really look at her as they spoke. "The situation is delicate," Paul explained, lowering his voice. "Our systems have been glitchy lately." "Glitchy how?" Eleanor asked, pulling out her old notebook. Richard cleared his throat. "Booking errors, flight plan inconsistencies, customer data appearing where it shouldn't." Eleanor frowned. "That sounds more serious than glitchy." "We've kept it contained," Tom said quickly. "No public incidents." The plane took off, and the men finally handed her a tablet with access to their systems. As the flight attendants served gourmet meals to the other passengers, Eleanor dove into lines of code, forgetting her hunger. What she found made her stomach turn for a different reason. It wasn't just glitches. Someone had built backdoors into the entire system to liberate weak spots. Customer credit card numbers, home addresses, passport details, all exposed to anyone who knew where to look. Flight plans could be altered. Fuel calculations could be tampered with. Eleanor looked up. How long has this been happening? The three men exchanged glances. We first noticed unusual patterns about 6 months ago, Paul admitted. She dug deeper, following the trail. The backdoors weren't added 6 months ago. The code showed they were built into the system 3 years earlier, during a major update. This wasn't an outside attack. It was done from within. You knew, she said quietly. Not just for 6 months. For years. Tom shifted in his seat. We suspected some vulnerabilities. These aren't vulnerabilities, Eleanor cut in. These are deliberate access points. And there's been activity. Someone's been extracting data regularly. Richard's face paled beneath his tan. Can you fix it? That's not the only question you should be asking, Eleanor replied. You've been compromised for years. Thousands of customers affected. That's a mandatory disclosure situation. The three men fell silent as the plane began its descent. Eleanor watched them, remembering how they'd let her wait outside like she wasn't important enough to bother with. Now they needed her desperately. After landing, they rushed her to the company headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. Unlike at the airport, nobody questioned her presence now, though she caught curious glances at her simple clothes. In a conference room on the top floor, Eleanor connected her laptop to the main screen. As executives in expensive suits filed in, she laid out what she'd found. Your entire network is compromised, she explained, showing them the hidden pathways in their code. Customer data, flag operations, maintenance records, employee files, all exposed. A heavy silence fell over the room. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below, people going about their days, trusting their information was safe, their flights were secure. The breach originated internally, Eleanor continued. From this building, actually. That's impossible, a gray-haired man at the head of the table said. We have top security protocols. Eleanor pulled up a log of access points. Someone with high-level clearance created these backdoors during the system update 3 years ago. They've been siphoning data ever since. She pointed to a pattern in the code. See these signatures. This wasn't some random hacker. This was designed by someone who knows your systems inside and out. The executives exchanged nervous glances. How bad is it? Paul finally asked. Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. I've seen security breaches before. Small ones, big ones. But this is the worst I've ever seen. And the fact that you've known about it, even partially, and didn't alert your customers or the authorities. She shook her head. That's not just a technical problem. That's a crime. As the implications sank in, Eleanor noticed something else. A document open on one executive's laptop. A ready-made contract for her to sign, with a confidentiality clause and a sum of money that made her eyes widen. They didn't want her to fix the problem. They wanted her to hide it. The hotel room was nicer than any place Eleanor had ever stayed. Thick carpet, a bed so soft it felt like a cloud, and a bathroom with fancy soaps she was tempted to take home for her mother. But she couldn't enjoy any of it. She sat at the desk, staring at the paper they'd given her. The contract offered more money than she'd ever seen. 3 years' worth of her usual income for just a few days' work. Enough to pay off her mother's medical bills. Enough to fix the leaky roof. Enough to hire full-time help so she wouldn't have to worry every time she left the house. All she had to do was quietly patch their system. No reports, no alerts to customers, no mentions to regulators. Just fix the backdoors and walk away with a check. It's the practical solution, Paul had explained as they drove her to the hotel. We avoid a public relations disaster. Our customers don't panic unnecessarily, and you receive generous compensation for your discretion. Eleanor picked up her phone and called home. How is she? She asked when Lily answered. She asked for you twice, Lily said. The night nurse is here now. Your mom's asleep. Did she take her medicine okay? Yes, but Eleanor, the pharmacy called. Her new prescription isn't covered by insurance. It's going to be $600 for a month's supply. Eleanor closed her eyes. $600 they didn't have, unless she signed this contract. After hanging up, she walked to the window. The city lights sparkled below. People in those buildings, in houses across the country, were booking flights on their phones and laptops right now, entering credit card information, passport numbers, addresses, trusting that their information was safe. And it wasn't. She thought about the woman at the first-class lounge who'd looked at her like she was nothing, the executives who had let her wait for hours, the whole system built on appearances, where people who looked important were treated well and people like her were invisible. The same company that didn't think she deserved basic courtesy was now offering her a fortune to help them hide their mistakes. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and opened her laptop. While the executives had talked, she'd secretly copied key files showing the extent of the breach. Now she examined them more carefully. The passenger manifests, flight crew schedules, maintenance records, all exposed. A pilot's home address sitting unprotected. A flight attendant's medical history. A passenger's children's names and schools. Real people, not numbers. She thought about her mother, who had taught second grade for 40 years before getting sick. Always do what's right, she used to tell Eleanor, especially when it's hard. Eleanor reached for her phone again, but stopped. They'd expect her to call someone. They might even be monitoring her calls. Instead, she opened a secure browser and began typing. She didn't contact authorities directly, not yet. She needed protection first. She wrote a detailed account of everything she'd found and everything she'd been asked to do. She encrypted it and set it up to automatically send to 3 trusted contacts in cybersecurity. She didn't enter a password every 12 hours. A dead man's switch. Then she began organizing the evidence, creating a clear record anyone could understand. The backdoors, the data access logs, the timeline showing when the company became aware of the breach and chose to hide it. It took hours. Outside her window, the sky began to lighten. Elena hadn't slept, but she felt strangely alert. For years, she'd solved problems from the shadows of her little home office, never standing up, never speaking out. But this wasn't just about computer code anymore. It was about right and wrong. She showered and put on the same simple clothes she'd worn yesterday. No fancy suit could change who she was. She tucked her laptop into her backpack and checked the time. The executives would be waiting for her answer at breakfast. They thought they knew what she would choose: money over principles, silence over truth. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Eleanor's hands shook slightly as she rode the elevator down to the hotel restaurant. Not from fear, but from lack of sleep and too much coffee. All night she had worked, organizing everything she found into clear, simple files that anyone could understand. The restaurant was fancy: white tablecloths, crystal glasses, waiters in bow ties. Elena spotted the executives immediately. They sat at a corner table, talking quietly among themselves, looking fresh and rested in crisp suits. When Paul saw her, he waved her over with a confident smile. "Good morning," he said as she sat down. "Sleep well?" "Not really," Eleanor answered honestly. She declined the waiter's offer of coffee. She was jittery enough. Tom slid a folder toward her. "We've updated the contract. The compensation has been increased by 15%. Elena didn't touch it. Instead, she placed her own folder on the table. "I have some questions first." Richard nodded. "Of course. Technical questions about the fix." "No. I want to know who created the backdoors." The 3 men exchanged glances. Paul cleared his throat. "That's not relevant to your task. We just need them closed." "It's completely relevant," Eleanor said, her voice firmer than she expected. "These weren't mistakes or oversights. Someone deliberately built ways to access passenger data, flight plans, even maintenance records." Tom leaned forward. "As we explained yesterday, we believe it may have been an outside attack." "That's not true," Eleanor cut in. "The code signatures show it was done during a system update 3 years ago, from inside your network, by someone with top-level access." A heavy silence fell over the table. A waiter approached but backed away when he sensed the tension. "Here's what I found," Eleanor continued, opening her folder. She pulled out a printout of access logs. The same executive login credentials were used to create every backdoor, and the same credentials have been used regularly to extract data. She pointed to a highlighted ID number. This user. Who is it? No one spoke. Finally, Richard sighed and took off his glasses to clean them. That would be our chief technology officer. Who reports directly to the CEO, Eleanor added. She'd done her research last night. Your company has been stealing and selling its own customers' data for 3 years. Paul's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, one you can't prove. Actually, I can. Eleanor pulled out more papers. These are records of data transfers to offshore servers. The same servers are linked to a shell company that's owned by another shell company that's ultimately owned by your parent corporation. Tom's lawyer instincts kicked in. Where did you get these documents? You weren't authorized to. I'm authorized to investigate your security breach. That's what I did. Eleanor kept her voice calm. You've been selling personal information, credit cards, addresses, travel habits, to data brokers, and covering it up. Richard put his glasses back on. What exactly do you want, Ms. Carter? Eleanor took a deep breath. This was the moment. Last night, she had made contact with an old friend who worked at the Federal Trade Commission, another who was a reporter specializing in tech privacy issues. She had secured encrypted channels to share what she'd found if necessary. I want you to do the right thing, she said simply. Notifying your customers about the breach. Report it to the proper authorities. Fix the security holes for real, not just to cover them up. Paul laughed, though there was no humor in it. That would cost us billions. The stock would plummet. There would be lawsuits, investigations. Yes, Eleanor agreed. There would be. And if we refuse? Tom asked, his voice cold. Eleanor met his gaze. Then by this time tomorrow, everything I found goes to federal regulators, consumer protection agencies, and the press. All at once. You signed an NDA when you took this job, Tom reminded her. NDAs don't cover criminal activity, Eleanor replied. And this is criminal. You're bluffing, Paul said. You're just trying to get more money. Eleanor stood up, gathering her papers. I've created secure files that will automatically release to multiple contacts if I don't reset them every 12 hours. So even if you tried to stop me personally, the information would still get out. She picked up her backpack. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to begin the notification process and contact authorities. After that, I can't stop what happens next. As she walked away, leaving the contract untouched on the table, Eleanor was surprised to find her hands weren't shaking anymore. Eleanor spent the day in her hotel room, waiting. She'd said her piece, laid out her evidence, and given them a deadline. Now all she could do was watch the clock and see what they would choose. She tried to distract herself by calling home. The night nurse put her mother on the phone. When are you coming back? Her mother asked, her voice thin but clear. Soon, Mom. Maybe tomorrow. Did you do good work there? Eleanor smiled slightly. Even at 78, her mother still asked the same question she'd asked when Eleanor came home from school as a child. I think so, she answered. I hope so. After hanging up, Eleanor checked her laptop. No unusual activity on her secure files, no attempts to hack in, but no contact from the executives either. At 3 p.m., her hotel room phone rang. Ms. Carter, said the cool voice of a woman she didn't recognize. Your presence is requested in the main boardroom at Sky High headquarters. A car is waiting downstairs. Eleanor gathered her things carefully. She triple-checked her laptop security, made sure her phone was fully charged, and tucked a small USB drive into her sock, a backup of everything just in case. The car that picked her up was sleek and black with tinted windows. The driver didn't speak, and Eleanor didn't try to make conversation. Her mind was racing through possibilities. Would they threaten her? Try to bribe her with even more money? Had they already contacted authorities? When she arrived at the gleaming headquarters building, a security guard escorted her straight to the top floor. The boardroom doors were closed. The guard gestured for her to enter, then walked away. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor pushed open the heavy doors. The room was full, not just Paul, Tom, and Richard, but at least 15 people sitting around a massive table. At the head sat an older man with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. The nameplate in front of him read William Kent, CEO. Ms. Carter, he said, standing. Please join us. Eleanor took the only empty seat directly across from him. She recognized some faces from news articles: the company's chief financial officer, the head of public relations, the chief technology officer who had created the backdoors. "I understand you've presented my colleagues with some concerning information," Kent said, his voice measured. "Yes," Eleanor replied simply. "And you've given us until 9 a.m. tomorrow to begin disclosing this information to authorities and customers." Eleanor nodded. Kent steepled his fingers. "Do you understand what that would do to this company? The lawsuits, the regulatory fines, the damage to our reputation?" "I do. Thousands could lose their jobs. Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, people who had nothing to do with any of this." Eleanor didn't waver. "I understand that, and I'm truly sorry for them. But millions of your customers have had their personal information exposed. They deserve to know." The PR director, a woman in a sharp red suit, leaned forward. "We could offer compensation packages, credit monitoring services for affected customers." "That's not enough," Eleanor said, "not after 3 years of deliberate data theft." "Ms. Carter," Tom the lawyer cut in, "we've discussed potential legal actions against you for unauthorized access to—" Kent raised his hand, silencing Tom. "That's not the direction we're taking." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. For a long moment he was quiet. Then he turned back to the room. "I've been CEO of this airline for 12 years," he said finally. "Built it from a regional carrier to an international competitor. And now I discover my own executives have been running a side business selling our customers' data." He looked directly at the CTO, who seemed to shrink in his chair. "Ms. Carter is right," Kent continued. "We have a legal and moral obligation to disclose this breach." Murmurs broke out around the table. Paul looked stunned. The PR director was frantically writing notes. "Sir," Richard protested, "the financial implications will be severe," Kent finished for him. "But not as severe as what happens if we continue this cover-up and it comes out anyway, which it will." He nodded toward Eleanor. "Ms. Carter has seen to that." He turned to his executive assistant, who stood quietly in the corner. "Call an emergency board meeting for 7 p.m. Contact our outside counsel and find me the direct number for the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau." Eleanor watched in amazement as the room erupted into activity. People making calls, gathering papers, arguing in hushed voices. Kent approached her. "It appears we owe you our thanks, Ms. Carter. Though I doubt many in this room see it that way right now." "I didn't do it for thanks," Eleanor said. "No," he agreed. "You did it because it was right. That's unfortunately rare these days." He extended his hand. "We'd like you to stay on as a consultant through this process. Help us fix what's broken properly this time." Eleanor looked at his outstretched hand, remembering how it felt to be left waiting outside the first-class lounge. How different things looked when they knew what she could do rather than judging by what she wore. 3 months later, Eleanor sat in her living room, sipping tea and watching the morning news. Her mother dozed in the recliner beside her, covered with a soft new blanket. The house was warmer now. They'd finally fixed the heating system, and sunlight streamed through clean windows. On the screen, a reporter stood outside Sky High headquarters. In the continuing fallout from what analysts are calling the biggest corporate security scandal of the decade, Sky High Airlines has announced another round of compensation for affected customers. Eleanor smiled slightly. The day after the boardroom meeting, the company had made its first public statement admitting to the data breach. The stock had indeed plummeted, just as Paul had predicted. The chief technology officer and several other executives had been fired. Some now faced criminal charges. But the airline hadn't collapsed. Under Kent's leadership, they'd taken an unusual approach. Complete transparency. They'd told the truth, all of it, and then set about making it right. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "You're on the business channel again." She changed the channel and caught the middle of an interview with Kent. "The old way of doing business, putting appearance over substance, profits over people, nearly destroyed this company," he was saying. "Our new security protocols, designed by our head of cybersecurity, have become the gold standard for the industry." The camera cut to a photo of Eleanor standing next to Kent at a press conference. She looked different now, more confident, though still in simple clothes. No fancy suit or designer dress could change who she was inside, and she no longer felt any need to try. After that first shocking day, Kent had asked Eleanor to stay on permanently. She'd refused the executive title he'd offered, preferring to work as an independent consultant and from home, where she could still care for her mother. But her recommendations had reshaped not just Sky High's security systems, but their entire corporate culture. Her doorbell rang. Eleanor opened it to find a delivery person holding a large envelope. "Eleanor Carter?" the young woman asked. "That's me. Special delivery. Need your signature." Inside the envelope was a magazine, Business Weekly, with her photo on the cover. The headline read, "The Whistleblower Who Changed an Industry." Eleanor shook her head in amazement. A year ago, she'd been invisible, just a woman in simple clothes that people like Vanessa from the first-class lounge looked right through. Now her story had sparked changes across the entire airline industry. New laws were being proposed. Other companies were examining their own practices. Her mother stirred in the recliner. "What's that, dear?" "Just a magazine, Mom," Eleanor said, setting it aside. The fame had never been what mattered to her. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Kent. "Board approved the new Customer Bill of Rights, implementing next month." Eleanor smiled. The Bill of Rights had been her idea, clear, simple rules about how all customers should be treated, regardless of what they wore or how much they paid for their ticket. No more leaving people standing outside lounges. No more looking through people as if they didn't matter. The doorbell rang again. This time it was a courier with a small package. Inside was a first-class ticket and a note. "For your upcoming trip to Washington to speak at the Consumer Protection Conference. No waiting outside this time. Kent." Eleanor laughed softly. She'd fly to Washington, but not in first class. She'd already booked her usual economy seat. Her price for helping wasn't luxury treatment for herself, it was fair treatment for everyone. Outside her window, a neighbor waved as she walked by. Since the story had broken, people looked at Eleanor differently. Some called her a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She'd just done what was right when it would have been easier not to. Her mother had always told her that one person could make a difference if they were brave enough. Eleanor hadn't believed it until now. She hadn't set out to shut down a company. Instead, she'd helped transform it into something better. And in the process, she'd transformed herself from a woman who'd been content to remain invisible to one who'd found her voice and used it to speak for those who couldn't. Eleanor picked up her tea, now cold, and went to make a fresh cup for herself and her mother. Outside, the postman delivered more letters, many from people sharing their own stories of being overlooked and underestimated, thanking her for standing up. The simple woman hadn't just changed a company, she'd started a movement.